Oh, hi. This is now the second talk in this Alexandria Review presentation, and this one is spot and futures, two different types of markets. So we're going to think on this presentation in international or global terms. A spot market, the commodities are exchanged immediately or on the spot, and there's no need for a contract. A futures market, commodities are exchanged in the future at a set price, and this would require a contract. So the spot market, for example, is, let's say, a Bitcoin exchange of fiat for Bitcoin, which is done immediately. In a futures market, an example would be payment on delivery of oil to China in the future, but we're going to set the price at the present set price. So there are three commodities involved in our example of selling oil from Canada to China. There's oil, there's a Canadian dollar, and there's the Chinese yuan. The seller wants Canadian dollars, while the buyer only has Chinese yuan. So the buyer and seller require a standard commodity which has an accepted price for both the Canadian dollar and the Chinese yuan. This standard commodity is known as the global reserve currency. This is the American dollar. The dollar is king. Why is the American dollar king? Well, following the Second World War, the American dollar was capable of buying a cup of coffee anywhere in the world. So everyone would accept the American dollar in payment. So the dollar was, at that time, backed by gold. That has now changed, and it basically has a well-established global exchange rate. The dollar is well known throughout the world as having a standard global exchange rate. Selling oil in an international trade using the spot market. Oil is delivered to a Chinese port, for example. China buys US dollars with yuan and gives to Canada. Canada sells the US dollars for Canadian dollars, and the oil is marked as paid with a receipt. If only it was that simple. More realistically, the oil is delivered, and a weigh bill and delivery receipt are exchanged. The yuan is given to an international bank, and the international bank gives Canadian dollars maybe about 6 months later or a long time later to Canada. Using the futures market. Before delivery, both buyer and seller want to lock in a price or a delivery price. The seller sells, this is where the futures market happens, we bring in the futures market, the seller sells an oil contract against US dollars in the future, the present price, and buys US dollars for Canadian dollars at the same future date at the present price. Gone through that. The buyer does the opposite. The buyer buys an oil contract against US dollars in the future at the present price and sells US dollars for Chinese yuan at the same future date at the present price. Both sides, in effect, bet against themselves. They don't bet against each other. This is a very important. I'm betting against myself. So I want to lose in one market, gain in another. They cancel each other, and that way I've locked in the price. So on delivery, what each party loses on the spot, they gain in the respective futures contracts, and what each party gains on the spot, they lose on each respective futures contract. So with the delivery of a commodity in the future, there is no winning and losing in the futures market. It is merely a hedge against price fluctuation. That's the design of the future market. It's what it's supposed to be used for. How the spot and futures are connected. So the prices, the future price, the spot price eventually connect at delivery. So the futures contracts are once a month. You buy to that particular month, and open contracts must be settled. All the contracts have to be settled at the end of that month. The commodity has to be delivered at the settlement price. The commodity has to be bought on the spot market to meet future contract obligations. Most of the time this is not done. Most of the time if I've got a short contract, I'll cancel it by taking out a long contract. They cancel against each other, and it's done. However, I may, because if I wish, actually expect delivery of the commodity, such as oil, such as copper, such as whichever. I want actual physical delivery of that, and the seller has to actually deliver the commodity. So if, for example, we have Bitcoin, someone has to deliver the Bitcoin to sell a futures contract. Let's say they need 100 Bitcoin. They would have to buy it on the spot to be able to deliver it. So as a result, the price on the spot's going to go up because someone's scrambling around like crazy trying to buy Bitcoin because they have to deliver the actual physical Bitcoin. So the physical delivery of the commodity is absolutely necessary to ensure a fair market. There are two reasons for having a futures market. One is the fluctuating prices of a particular commodity, and the other is that we have multiple currencies. So we've got to match all the currencies together, and nobody has a currency you want to be able to deliver it and so forth. So there are attempts to solve the multiple currency problem by having a single currency, such as the euro or the US dollar. The world right now desperately needs a global reserve currency that is not a fiat currency and that can be settled in an immediate spot market. And the world desperately needs a global futures exchange that is not based on fiat, that can also be settled in an immediate spot market. So there's some problems that we have. The amount of currency that is held up for settlement, as I say, it takes a long time for someone to actually get paid for their oil. That can be 6 months or it could be a year. We'll call that a global accrual. That's an accrual that is sitting somewhere. We now look, there are $18 trillion of manufactured goods in international transit every day. So basically manufactured goods, we'll say it's $18 trillion worth of manufactured goods that are on the water waiting for delivery. If we have something like, I don't know, anywhere 50%, or let's say we've got something like 15 or $12 trillion every single day that get delivered within 24 hours, and it takes 6 months for that to be settled, we have a time of accrual for 6 months with a lot of money. Basically multiply something like 12 to $18 trillion times every single day over 6 months. It's a lot of money. And there is no oversight whatsoever to what is happening with that money. There's no accountability for spending it while it's in transit. So while it's in transit, people can be doing all sorts of things by, basically create wars with it. We can destabilize governments. We can do all sorts of things. Absolutely no accountability, and no one knows who is doing it. It could be a financial institution. It could be a corporation, maybe a country, but highly, highly doubt that it would be a country that would be, in some way get its hands on the global accrual. So the problem with fiat as a reserve currency. A fiat currency is a currency of a particular country. Of course, good old USA. So the global reserve currency is manipulated all the time by every other country that is expecting delivery or shipping to the States and so forth, or even shipping between each other, because the American dollar is used as the standard. So the USA is much more susceptible, the US dollar is much more susceptible to currency attacks than any other country. And the strength of the US dollar, it's actually U.S. industry or labor that has protected the country up to now. So after the Second World War, America was so strong, its industry was so strong, it completely stabilized the dollar. The dollar was very, very strong. It could withstand an attack from just about anybody. And this is the reason in these days, if Wall Street sneezes, the world catches a cold, because all the other currencies in the world are based, if you like, on the American dollar. It's the common one. So that is basically a talk about futures and spot markets, and I'm open for questions. Does anybody seem to have any questions, or is it clear as mud? Everybody, what? Anyone? Yeah.
You mentioned gold and oil specifically.
Yeah.
What about other categories of commodities?
Gold's interesting because gold is not actually a consumable. It stays as gold. Copper, for example, is a consumable. Oil is a consumable. So basically a currency on oil, not a very good idea, because the oil, you have to use it, or basically it's like food. You use the stuff. So there's different types of commodities that way on what it's based on. Having it based on a particular commodity, such as gold, is a problem. Having it based on labor is a much better idea. It's the industrial strength of the company that keeps the currency strong. So really, people talk about the American dollar as backed by gold, or it's backed by the Fed, or this is all nonsense. The American dollar is backed by the industrial strength of the United States in the type of thing we have, or in the productivity of America. Other types of commodity might be intellectual properties, such as we have things coming up for a company, for example, like Google, has a lot of intellectual property, and as a result, and that's a huge benefit, for example, and it is exported back and forth and so forth. And that also affects the strength of the American dollar. So there's intellectual capacity of labor. We can think of, you know, very intelligent people cutting code and coming up with new ideas. It's a form of labor. Okay. Good question, thank you.
How do you think Bitcoin's been affected with the futures market?
I think it's toasted. I think that's the cause of the crash. I really do. And because it gives such a huge advantage to the short contracts, okay, to short it because there's no physical delivery. So for example, if at the end of the day someone had to deliver 100 Bitcoins, that's really going to affect the price. It's going to bring it back up again. So if someone shorted and they've used high frequency trading or something like that to drive the price down on the spot, which is not that hard to do because of the lack of volume, then all of a sudden and they have to settle on a cash settlement. Well, there it goes. But if at the end of it someone has to actually physically deliver, someone just sits back and just waits for the physical delivery, you know, someone's going to be left out of contract. They all fold to each other. Okay, so if there's a contract left over at the end, that poor guy's got to deliver because the other guy's waiting for his Bitcoin. So now he's got to go out, he's got to buy 100 Bitcoin to actually physically deliver it. So they can't hold it back and then high frequency trade with the Bitcoin. The only way you can drive down the price of Bitcoin is to actually have physical Bitcoin to be able to sell it down on the spot. You cannot sell the Bitcoin down unless you actually have Bitcoin. But it's the same Bitcoin on the spot, same Bitcoin is being sold down. You don't need that much Bitcoin to do it. But on a futures market, you need something like 100 Bitcoin. You better go get the 100 Bitcoin so you can actually physically deliver it. That ends that nonsense immediately. That's why the physical delivery makes it cleans up the market. It makes it a fair market. Right now, the market is not a fair market, and it is rigged for the shorts. The shorts have a huge advantage and is rigged basically for that. So if someone is going along, they're hooped. There's no way you'd go along because you're not going to get your physical delivery. And it's the lack of a physical delivery. If I'm going along, I can end this nonsense. I see the market's being manipulated. I'll just sit back and wait for the actual physical delivery of the Bitcoin itself.
And money that's in transit, how much of a percentage of that do you actually think is getting used as opposed to being in a transit position?
Every single stinking penny of it.
Yeah.
You betcha. They're not letting that money sit idle at all. That money is being used by the microsecond. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much for
Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.